I don't plan to stop making dolls. I think that there's so many that haven't been finished, so many that I need to make. But I guess I'll go without having done them all. But it'll be fun. I was born in Rockhampton and I grew up during the Second World War, and dolls weren't available. And I always wanted a China doll. And as I grew up, I decided to experiment. We had a fire where we had the boiler for washing. I put them in there, but they just crumbled up, and I got desperate about that. And at one stage, I started to cut them out of soap. It had been in the 50s. We had moved to Ipswich, and I had access to the recipe to make porcelain. Now, this is my workshop where I work with the clay. All of this is clay, glues, all sorts of things just there. I started doing some, school fetes and things like that. The first major exhibition was the Bicentennial, which I did. I was an official artist for the Bicentenary. I'd always thought that we had a specific look, an Australian look. Because we're in the sun, and men always looked out, squinted their eyes, and clothing. The country boys always wore a particular type of clothes. And I was just thinking along those lines. I didn't really intend to make portraits, but it seemed the best thing to do when I started, and I was able to meet all these exciting people. But these are some models. That's the first model of Captain Cook that I did here, and that was I did that in 1983. No, sorry, 84. January 1984. I sculpted that ready for the first Captain Cook. So that one. So that really looks like him. Oh, I suppose the most famous one in Australia is Sir Donald Bradman. Flew to Adelaide where he lived, and I went down a couple of times, and that was pretty good fun. And that was a big challenge because I didn't know anything about cricket. At that time, Greg Chappell was living just round the corner, and there were people like that I could talk to. And my mother had been an avid fan of Bradman, and that was exciting for her that I was working on that. The first head I sculpted was actually James Cook. I didn't meet him, of course. So the other people I met, Loris Bonney, Joan Sutherland, Robert Helpman, they were all very, very cooperative, wonderfully cooperative. I felt, Laurie Bonney thought it was marvellous, and we used to sit down and talk and go down to her house down in the coast and take flowers and chocolates, and she was great. I did do Paul Hogan. That was interesting, but I didn't have Paul. He was tied up at the time. It was just after his big movie came out, Crocodile Dundee. But he's got the knife and his crocodile, and they're on display. Those dolls are on display at QPAT, and they have been for some time. The 33 are scattered around museums, but all the musical ones and theatrical ones are at QPAT. The moulds are, well, there's various moulds, but they're all marked here. That's a two-piece mould, and that's one of the babies. I was awarded a Churchill Fellowship in 1982, and I was going around the world to various places because I was interested in the restoration and preservation of the old dolls, the old techniques, and I was offered a chance to go to Japan if I could tell them who I'd like to meet. And I knew about 3 doll makers, and I didn't realise they were national treasures. So I blindly said, these are the 3 names. And they arranged for me to meet each of the 3 national treasures. And that was pretty good. That was amazing. So from then on, I've been going to Japan regularly. When I went there, they were doing things that in my mind, I thought dolls should be. Dolls used to be just, all the old French and German dolls were dolls. They had their arms hanging loose, and they just turned their head or they slept. But Japanese dolls tell a story, and that they don't move, but they tell a story in just the way they're posed and the way their heads are. Yeah, I think the accessories are important if you're telling a story. You need something. I mean, your face tells it, but that little extra just puts it in place. Rather than, I mean, if I just did him standing the way you buy a doll, that wouldn't be the same. Although I did Henry Lawson sitting backwards on a chair because there'd been a well-known photograph of him doing that. So I did that because it always fascinated me, men who sat on a chair like that. My father used to do that. And I made a child doll sitting backwards on a chair doing puppets because my father he'd just get a sock and do these things when we were young. So I think there was a lot of that around me for a long time. Everything has to be graded to be the right size. You see, all the stitches have to be really in proportion, and the fabric has to be very light, because if I use the fabric the weight that we wear, that wouldn't work. And the ribbon has to be finer too. A lot of interesting people that I'd like to make dolls of, and some of them are artists, because I really like to do faces, because faces that they've lived in. Now, I mean, pretty people are easy, and you can just go buy things that are pretty. I like a face that's got character and has been lived in. I start jotting down things, and then I will draw. I'll do some drawings, just rough pencil drawings, just thinking about it and thinking about how I'm going to dress them. I have to sculpt. Well, I start with the face, and I usually, I have to remember also that because porcelain shrinks 18 3/4%, the porcelain I use, that it's going to be smaller, isn't it? So I have to think about all of those things, but I don't measure. I use my eye. I find that yes, because the doll will tell me whether it wants to have bigger hands or smaller hands. When you're sculpting, something happens. When I did Sir Robert Helpman, his hands are much larger than normal, because he always talked with his hands and he moved with his hands, and so I think I can take those liberties, and I do. I carved that out of wood, a fine. And then a paper clay. I use a paper clay to build up their features on the horse and his mohair and his reins. Well, it changed my life. It was been a wonderful, wonderful experience. It's like a dream. I feel, I wonder sometimes, did I really do all those things? Because it's been a magic. It's been magic moments for me.